First of all, my journey in the health field is in a very classical Western medical tradition, blended with Eastern Chinese tradition. After med school, I specialized in acupuncture and studied Chinese medicine, as well as Chinese herbs and also Chinese nutrition. I mean, nutrition according to the Chinese medicine philosophy. After that, I also studied Western naturopathy, and I actually found out that we can find in Western naturopathy all the answers that we need for our lifestyle, which we don't necessarily need to go to Chinese herbs to find those answers. And my journey with nutrition started with my studies, that is via the Chinese medicine approach, which is very different from the Western nutrition approach, because it basically uses the energetics of each kind of food. But my personal journey was a journey of, aside of all my professional endeavors, was a journey of someone who was a rather sick kid, treated in the very classical Western manner, that is a lot of antibiotics, some steroids for asthma and skin issues. And I had to deal with a lot of health issues throughout my childhood. It probably triggered my interest in using food as medicine in the first place. And then personally, having dealt with these issues using a Western medicine approach, I gradually started to make a connection with the food that I was basically, as Hippocrates said, the food is our daily medicine, or it can be our daily poison. And it's much later, actually, in my late 20s, that I really started to realize that. And I started making shifts very gradually, from the very standard European diet. I shifted a few things. I first started to cut out meat, and gradually I started to feel better in lots of areas, health-wise, but also physically and mentally. And the ethical part was important to me as well. So I should say I felt better spiritually as well,
Okay.
cutting out meat, and then gradually cutting out other animal products. And then there was a big personal shift for me, basically being rather happy on a standard vegetarian dash vegan diet. I was quite happy with my diet, but I still had to deal with several health issues which were ongoing and that I couldn't really figure out. I mean, I could find help with my knowledge in acupuncture, in Chinese medicine, and using Chinese herbs and also Western herbs, but it was up to a point. And I realized that the major shift that had to be taken was a complete food shift. Uh, and I went on a fasting, on a 1 week fasting.
So that was
Um,
food, it was just
it
water?
was only water. It
Okay.
was it was a, it was the traditional fasting, which is only water for 8 days,
Uh-huh.
and with a little preparation in the week before. That is, you slowly reduce your intake of food, and the last couple days you basically just a little bit of fruits, and so you prepare yourself for this fasting experience. You prepare your body also in order to get into the fasting easily and not experience all the detox symptoms that can arise during the first couple days of fasting. That's what people commonly encounter, you know, headaches and very, very common symptoms of
Mhm.
detox if you don't properly prepare.
And
And
sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
what does it do to you on a scientific level? Like, what is fasting? Like, what how do we benefit from it on a cellular level?
well, after that experience, which I sort of did instinctively, realizing the effects on myself, I was absolutely passionate about learning more about it and understanding the process of fasting and what it does to your body. So from then on, I started studying it very thoroughly. I also attended several major international congresses about fasting. That is, I studied both the medical fasting approach, the therapeutical fasting, and also the holistic fasting approach.
Mhm.
They are not necessarily interconnected, although they both deal with fasting, but the medical fasting approach and the studies, the scientific studies that are carried on fasting, do not take in account the diet of the person. So they study the fasting itself and they study the effects of fasting, which are fascinating. But the only downside is they don't take into account the diet before and afterwards, and you know the what we call the terrain of the person. But the, the benefits of fasting are tremendous. Basically, the studies show that after 16 to 24 hours of fasting, your body starts to shift in a mode that is called autophagy, which basically means that your body, which constantly has to deal with digestion and therefore doesn't necessarily have the resources to deal with everything else. That is with your own health, with regeneration, with rebuilding your tissues, rebuilding your cells, healing. All of that requires energy, which is not allowed by the fact that by eating, the body's first and foremost energy focus is on digestion. And of course, because most of the time our diet is not a really proper diet for human beings, which is a fruitarian diet, the body has to deal with inflammation. But we can talk about that also
Yes.
later, why the body has to deal with inflammation every time we eat basically anything else than
Yeah.
raw fruits or raw vegetables.
Because
And
I'd like to
yeah,
mention what just as a background thing. So, just for the people who are joining in, so Thomas shared his own journey of well-being, and then to arrive to a point of shifting that well-being through food after trying a lot of traditional Western medicine. And did you also try Chinese medicine in your healing journey?
oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done it all.
Okay.
Being the Chinese, the part of Chinese medicine which is the herbs, the acupuncture, or even the nutrition, because Chinese medicine has a tradition
Yeah.
of advices and direction of food for healing, but it's a very different approach from the one I found to be the most effective, shall we say.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So we were talking about the benefits of fasting, and the major benefits is autophagy, which happens starts to happen between 16 and 24 hours of fasting, and it increases. So it starts at 16 to 24 hours, and then if you give yourself, for example, another day or 3 days, or shall we say 8 days of fasting, or you know, people can go up to 20, even some fasting go to up to 40 days of water fasting. We can go into that later, but basically it increases. So the the bottom line is, the more health issues you have to deal with, the more time of fasting you'll need. That is, the more time your body will need to heal itself, to get those cells to um, catch the unhealthy cells, and either they're being consumed. And that's the beauty of our body, is that it has a self-healing potential, and fasting allows for all the damaged cells to be consumed by the body, and then of course eliminated.
Okay.
So the beautiful fasting journey.
Okay.
Personally, coming out of that journey, which lasted 8 days, I came out with tremendous health benefits that I already started feeling even throughout the week. But something occurred, which I didn't expect, is that I couldn't eat anything cooked.
Okay.
And I never even knew that there was, um, shall we say, a fashion of raw vegan. I didn't even know the word raw vegan.
Yeah.
To me, the best possible diet was going vegetarian slash vegan and, eating organic. And to me, that was the best of the best. So my body was telling me something. And, coming out of the fasting, I started to go back to my usual daily food, which was organic, vegetarian, vegan, and I couldn't take it. I could take nothing cooked, and it took me a while. It actually took me several days to understand what was happening and how to deal with it. And then I started to eat some fruits and some salads occasionally, and then my body responded very well. Like it was an immediate response. It was energy. It was a feeling of clarity and just feeling really well, and healthy. So that occurred to me as something, as a shift that was happening, and so I got very interested into understanding why this was happening to me, and also discovering the whole world of raw food, discovering that there were so many people out there who had made this shift as well, by different reasons. Some made it because of health reasons as well, and found tremendous benefits, health benefits out of it. And I started to learn a lot about it, and had many teachers, of course. One of the, I would say, most important teachers in this area is Dr. Robert Morse, who has written the Detoxination Miracle, and who has brought a very scientific, modern understanding to raw food, and to why a high fruit raw vegan diet is the diet we were intended for as human beings.
Could you elaborate a little bit on fruits? Because from my understanding and my interaction, is that like I've sort of come on this journey that you're describing over the last few months after having a similar experience of trying to heal, and be healthy and energetic and all these things that have been depleting over the last years. And I finally found like a way to feel better through eating raw fruits and raw vegetables. But before that, I was trying an antihistamine diet, like a low histamine diet, and which basically totally cuts out fruit. And I think there's a general collective misunderstanding around fruit. I think it's very often now disregarded for its beautiful vitamins and minerals. And even now during the lockdown, if you see, all the processed foods were sold out, and the aisles are still full of fresh fruits and vegetables. So what is going on? Like, why are people not understanding and connecting with fruits and vegetables?
I think we came very far as a species from what was intended for us as a diet, and the modern world just came very far from its origins and from understanding who we are. I mean, do we have a true understanding of who we are, and what are human beings? And actually, when you look at it from up close, it's not that complicated. If you look at our anatomy and physiology, which is basically, our teeth, our intestines, our hands, our jaws, all of that, it's an anatomy and physiology of a primate. Our closest sibling is the bonobo monkey, and that has been science proven. And it has been science proven as well that our original diet was a fruitarian diet. They have found, even back in 79, an anthropologist found from old skeleton of several tens of thousands years old, that the shape of the teeth and the traces on the teeth were proving that the food of that species, which is our ancestor, was fruit-based entirely.
Okay.
So it all makes sense. It's all a very logical and easy to understand reason why we're made to eat fruits, and nature provided us from thousands of years ago with everything we needed. Before we started, growing grains and and handle animals and all of that. Way before that, nature provided everything for us to grow and survive as a species, and that was fruits with a great variety, with a flavor and a natural taste for it. If you put a piece of fruit in front of a baby and any other kind of food which is not fruit, you can be sure 100% the baby will go for the fruit, because we have a natural taste for it, and it's on purpose. It's completely logical. That's the food that was made for us. Unfortunately, as you said, as a species, we came very far from it, and nowadays with the lockdown, as you said, the supermarkets were empty of the processed food, and the fruits and vegetables were full, because that's the habits we went into generation after generation. Of course, the use of grains and agriculture and animal products was a huge shift in our species, over 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And coming back to babies, because at Alma we interact a lot with little babies and children.
Yeah.
And what about like what about the gut and the whole process and journey of their health? Isn't that really related to the food and the gut?
Of course. I mean, the gut, that is the microbiome, which now is commonly known and discussed and studied, which is fairly recent. People spoke, even in the 90s or in the early 2000s, people spoke of the intestines as being the second brain. But only recently they started to come up with this concept of the microbiome and what it means, and the importance of the microbiome in our health and in so many aspects of our lives, even of our personalities. So the microbiome is established on birth. It's created the moment the child is given birth. And actually, there are some very interesting studies that show the difference between natural childbirth and C-section, and the difference in microbiome, because again, our natural way of acquiring the microbiome is the moment we're given birth through the natural ways. And this is the baby swallows basically the mucosa, and that creates its initial microbiome. Now, the microbiome is something alive. It's basically an amount of bacteria, of good bacteria. As you know, we have good and bad bacteria. So it's a tremendous amount of millions of good bacteria that is in our gut, and that is responsible for dealing with so many aspects, not only with digestion, but also with inflammation, with the immune system. That's why we could also talk about the relationship between food and disease, and of course even the current disease or so-called pandemic, and the relationship with gut health, because basically the people who have a healthy gut, who have a strong microbiome, they can come across any bacteria or virus, and it will just come and
Overcome
go.
it.
They will not
Yeah.
be affected by it, or very, very slightly, no compare to to what's happening to some people in the hospitals nowadays. But that's another topic. So going back to the relationship with fruits and raw food in general, shall we say raw fruits and vegetables, those are the only foods that have enzymes. Basically, we call raw food living food. And the reason being that it's full of enzymes. Take any fruit, for instance, it's full of enzymes. Those enzymes, which are living organism, uh, participates in feeding our microbiome in the most healthy way. So going back to your question, if after childbirth and breastfeeding, which is another topic we can go into as well,
Yeah.
but after that, if the child is being fed with living foods, with fruits and vegetables uncooked, the new enzymes will continuously feed the baby's microbiome and contribute to it being healthy. If the child starts to being fed with so-called dead food, why dead food? Because basically grains, dairy, beans, or any animal product is dead food, is food which after cooking has no enzymes left, has nothing alive left in it, and this food is not recognized as the body by the body as food. That's why every time you eat something cooked, you have a minor inflammation occurring in your body. And that has been proved scientifically over 100 years ago. It's called digestive leukocytosis. And that inflammation, when you eat cooked food every day, you don't realize that it occurs. What's very interesting for me, now that I've been over a year completely raw, every time, once in a while, I, experiment with something slightly cooked, and I feel it immediately. It's like a mild fever. And actually, it's been measured scientifically that the body temperature rises when you eat something cooked. And even it doesn't matter whether it's cooked and hot or whether it's cooked and cold. It's the fact that it's cooked. It causes the body to have this leukocytosis, which is an inflammation, and therefore the body temperature rises. So it's very interesting to notice when you become sensitive enough to that. You can experience it for yourself.
And how do we what are like the symptoms of the inflammation? Is it fatigue? Is it bloating?
Well, going back to the baby. So the baby is being fed with dead food, that is cooked food. And in the beginning, the microbiome is still strong enough, granted, if the baby has been properly breastfed, and there comes also the question of the diet of the mother who is breastfeeding. But that's the next topic. But granted, the baby has been healthily breastfed and the microbiome is healthy. In the beginning, when the microbiome is strong, it can deal with cooked food. That is, for me, even after a year completely raw, if I eat something cooked, I will feel a slight inflammation, but on the next day or the day after, maybe I will get a little mucusy, maybe I'll have something, but my body, the microbiome is strong enough to overcome it. So in the beginning, the baby will overcome the cooked food, but gradually, after several months, after several years of eating mostly those kind of foods, that is grains, dairy, animal products, starchy cooked vegetables,
Yes.
Very little amount generally of fresh fruits. The microbiome becomes very poor. So from imagine an army of millions of healthy bacteria that is ready to work and function and fight anything that comes against the immune system. This army is reduced drastically, and the microbiome becomes poor, weak, and so it cannot work properly. Therefore, it cannot work properly. It cannot digest properly. It cannot fight any unhealthy bacteria or virus. So it's basically becoming weaker and weaker as years go by. And because the microbiome is responsible and has, so much duties, shall we say, within the physiology and the homeostasis of the body, when it's weakened and there is this constant inflammation, constant leukocytosis, then you have the beginning of disease, which can take effect in different ways according to the individual, according to the terrain the baby is being born with. The baby inherits the terrain of the mother. The baby inherits the terrain, of its genes. But that's, shall we say, 50% of it. So
Would you
we are born
define
with
terrain?
strong.
Would you mind just quickly defining terrain for everyone?
Yeah, terrain. It goes back to it's a very interesting story of a fight between two of the greatest scientists we've ever had in the 20th century. That is Béchamp and Pasteur, two both French. And basically, in short, Pasteur is at the origin of the germ theory, and he's at the origin of many of the vaccines and a lot of the medical logic and the medical endeavor nowadays worldwide is inherited from Pasteur, from his way of thinking, his way of understanding the body, his way of understanding health, which was not entirely true. At the same time, when lived Pasteur, lived another scientist, who was called Béchamp, Antoine Béchamp, and his theory was not germ theory. His theory was not that we are constantly attacked from the outside by germs and we have to fight them, we have to eliminate them, and all of that. His theory was that everything is about our terrain. And terrain, literally in French, it means the field. So it's literally the background that we are born with and the background that we carry out throughout our lives. So it's the field, it's the background, it's how to explain that. The terrain is the microbiome, for instance. It's part of your terrain. It's a big part of your terrain. If you have a healthy microbiome, you have a strong terrain. If you have a strong terrain, you basically are immune. And there comes the definition and understanding of immunity, because what Béchamp says is that when you have a strong terrain, you don't need to, you're not fighting germs. Basically, you're in contact with any kind of bacteria and viruses, and we are constantly in contact with so-called germs. But the body deals with it. It doesn't need to fight and eliminate them necessarily. It will eliminate what it doesn't need, what is not good for it, but it will have a constant exchange, as with the air we breathe. The body has a constant exchange with the so-called germs. And therefore, building up body's strengths and body's natural strengths, that is the terrain. We function in the way we're supposed to function as a human being. So that's the terrain. And
thank you.
Now, in the current so-called pandemic, we don't speak way enough of the terrain, which to me is fundamental, because we speak of people, contracting the disease, and then we have to treat the disease. So we have to give, antibiotics, or we have to find a vaccine. But we are again in this very old and wrong theory of Pasteur, which was we have to fight a germ. And actually, the story that I haven't finished is that at the end of his life, on his deathbed, Pasteur admitted to one of his friends, who was another scientist called Claude Bernard, and he said his last words in his deathbed was, Béchamp was right. Germ is nothing, terrain is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he understood it himself. Unfortunately, the scientific community has not understood that and has not changed and evolved accordingly. It still sticks in those old understandings, which are completely wrong. And the more and more doctors nowadays get to that understanding and try to bring people to a different view of medicine and of health and of immunity and all of that. And that the terrain is indeed everything. And the terrain starts with the microbiome. It's the first and foremost of a healthy terrain, a strong terrain.
Okay, amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, and so yeah, please continue with your talk on fruits, the enzymes, the active enzymes, and how the body and the digestion and the inflammation, and how we actually don't know how much cooked foods actually can harm us.
Yeah, well, basically, if you constantly eat food which has not been made for our body, which is dead and cooked food, uh, we are in this constant inflammation, constant leukocytosis, and several diseases start to occur from that, going from mild acute diseases to severe chronic diseases up to cancer. This is all due to our daily medicine or our daily poison, as Hippocrates wrote, which is food. So everything is related to food. Everything goes back to food. And understanding the difference between the food that was intended for us, that is raw fruits and green leaves, basically, which is what nature intended for us, and everything else. There is no halfway, I should say. There
Okay.
is no halfway in saying, for instance, oh, okay, I'll eat some fruits in the morning and I'll eat some pasta in the evening, or I'll eat I'll eat a little bit raw and then I still have cravings of cooked and then I'll eat a little bit cooked. Basically, there is no halfway because of the microbiome, because the microbiome is takes time. So it takes time to reshape itself. So for instance, take someone who has eaten cooked for years. That person switches to raw, which was my case a little over a year ago.
Same
Um,
here. I'm only a month
yeah,
in.
yeah. And that shift takes some time. Of course, I would say after a week or two, you start feeling the effects. It's huge. After a week or two, you start feeling the physical effects and the mental effects because it goes together, And science has proven the relationship between the microbiome and our thoughts and our emotions, which is so interesting. But there is definitely a relationship between everything that makes us human, and that is our physical level, but also our emotional and our mental level, and I should say also the spiritual level. So,
Mhm.
long story short, after a week or two, you start feeling the effects. But it will take much longer for your microbiome to recreate and to adapt back to what it needs and to become again healthy, alive,
Yeah.
basically to take the earlier image, to repopulate that army, which is a million of healthy bacteria in the microbiome. It will take a while to repopulate.
But
Now,
it's never too late, is it? Because
it's
see,
never too late.
unusual
No, no, it's
mentors asking, I'm 70 years old. Can I start now or am I too late?
it's never too late. It's never too late to do the right thing. And we have a fantastic ability to adapt. We have survived for generations and generations with this diet that most of people have nowadays, which is a completely wrong diet, and still we have survived, despite all the diseases that occurred. And so exponentially because we have so much more diseases that occurred in the last 100 years compared to the previous 3,000 years. But despite of that, we have survived. That proves our amazing capacity as a species to adapt. But we can also adapt back to the right thing. As soon as we make the shift, the results, they come very quickly. So no, it's not too late at 70 to make that shift, and the benefits will be huge for the next, 20, 30, and 40 years that person has to live. Because, again, science has proven through studies that we have the ability anatomically and physiologically to live in up to about 120 years old. So why don't we all live up to that age? Well, mostly because of disease, and the more age goes, the more people have disease because it accumulates. You see, so of course, the earlier you make that shift, the better. But even if you make that shift at 70, it's how to say, it's a wonderful gift that you will do to yourself in increasing your health and vitality in those latter decades, and it's uh, it's so beautiful to see someone age beautifully. There is a woman in France who is quite famous, who is called Irène Grosjean, and she just turned 90 years old, and she's been a raw vegan and a naturopath, and she's been teaching, and she's been living that diet for over 50 years. And
Yeah.
she's 90 and she travels the world and she teaches and she, goes and runs every day, and she's absolutely stunning. And she's a proof of the vitality that aging with this diet can bring.
So what would your advice be on the food plate and the day? Like how do you have fruits throughout the entire day? Is there a formula? Like for instance, I recall 80% fruits, 20% raw vegetables.
Okay, so there are different approaches to raw food. Once we've established and understood that raw fruits and some green leaves are the best diet for us, once that has been established, there are different approaches to it and different traditions, depending on who wrote the book, basically.
Yeah.
So having studied a lot of it, having read almost every book that is about raw food and its relationship to health and using food as medicine, my take would be to summarize it in having a diet which is basically 80-90% fruits, fresh, organic, mandatory to be organic, and some green leaves, so some light salads, simple salads, and some occasional fat from fruits or nuts. So fats from fruits or nuts is basically avocado or nuts and seeds,
And
with the
coconut?
exception of, yeah, coconut meat is fat. Coconut water is not, and it's wonderful. Coconut water is very pure. It's very rich in electrolytes. So I, for instance, don't drink water anymore. Like I used to, like everyone, buy my bottles of water, or I used to filter my tap water and all of that. I actually don't need to drink water anymore. I get all of my water intake basically from fruits and from coconut water occasionally. And I don't even need to drink coconut water every day. There are periods when I would feel like some fruits will hydrate me less, and I would feel it, and then I would drink some coconut water. But basically, it's, hydration is another topic. You basically don't need to drink any other water if you have a supply of fruits that are rich in water and coconut water.
We have it
So,
frequently is by parents when we have the kids in our classes and things. Like what about, like when we're talking about plant-based food, about fruits and vegetables when we serve them, very often the schools and the parents are like, yeah, but what about protein? What about they need energy, they need carbs? And what do you respond to that?
Again, it's a whole misconception that has been carried out throughout the 20th century. It's fairly recent, but it's a misconception that has been carried out again and again. And it's now somehow imprinted in people's minds because also it's carried out by Western nutritionists and doctors. But it's a complete misconception. When you look at it, um, mother's milk, it has under 3% of proteins. And that is the main thing that is fed to us to grow. So if you look at it in nature, you know, a cow's milk to feed the calf has the same more or less percentage of protein to grow a whole cow from a calf, you know. So it's very factual, you know. It's not something very mystical to understand. When you look at it closely, that's more or less the amount of protein we need. And that amount of protein,
3%.
yeah,
Yeah.
to grow a
yeah.
cow or to grow a human being
Yeah.
from a baby, you know. So we don't need proteins. And of course, when we stopped growing, we need it even less so. So we need a tiny amount of it, which is provided by some fruits and some vegetables and nuts, more than enough. You know,
Could you
some
give us some
nuts.
examples?
Oh yeah, but for example, you know, almonds are have a very high amount of proteins, which is even more than what is requested by our body. Therefore, the protein, which is now, if we talk about chemistry of alkaline and base, or alkaline or base and acid, the protein is more on the acid side of chemistry. So we should be aware of not having too much um, protein, because we want to maintain um, our body towards base or alkaline. But that's a whole other topic that we
Yeah.
can get into later. But basically, eating too much almonds can have a negative effect, because it's too rich in fats and too rich in proteins. So we don't want too much of that. A good bias that has been established by Dr. Doug Graham with his book 80-10-10 is basically that you eat 80% of carbohydrates from fruits and some mild simple vegetables, 10% of fats from vegetables, fruits, that is avocado or nuts, and 10% protein from vegetables or nuts or some fruits. So this idea of the 80-10-10, which became pretty famous, is another interesting approach of that we can use throughout our week. So basically, if you use that approach, you think throughout the week that you would eat about 80% of fruits, 10% of nuts and avocado throughout your week, and 10% of vegetables or nuts that are rich in protein. That's one way of establishing it. But you need those tricks in the beginning, you know, to make the shift. After a while, you learn to have an inner dialogue with your body. And that's the most beautiful part that happens
Intuitive
after
eating.
several. Yes, it's intuitive, but you know, intuitive sometimes means that it comes from somewhere outside. But here it's like an understanding, which is more an increased sensitivity. After a while on a raw diet, your as your body becomes healthy again, your sensitivity is increased, your eyesight is increased, your hearing is increased, your sensitivity to smells is increased. I have that a lot, for instance. I have become extremely sensitive to smells. I can smell something like, you know,
A
several
mile away.
meters away. Well, not a mile away, but several meters away.
Okay.
And the sensitivity of your inner organs as well. Therefore, when I eat, mostly fruits, and I can spend a whole week eating only fruits, at some point I will understand, I will feel within if there is a need for something else. I will feel within the need for some fat. I will feel the need for avocado or for some nuts. I will feel the need for some leafy greens, for minerals. That's again another topic, and we can talk also about B12 and the whole misconception. Another big misconception is for vegans to supplement in B12, because again, our natural laws tell you that you don't need to supplement if you have the proper food. If you had the food that was intended for you by nature, you don't need to supplement. But that's another topic.
Yes.
So basically, after a while, your body is telling you, and you have this beautiful interaction with your own body, where you learn from it. You don't need to learn from books anymore. Books help you to make the shift. They help you to bring you in the intellectual and mental state of understanding that will help to guide you in the first phase. That would be my summary after over a year.
Mm-hmm. And someone just asked about juicing, like shall they have the fruits as they are, or juice them, or a combination?
It's best to have the fruit as they are, because the fruits as they are, they have the fiber. You will regulate your appetite much better, because one can juice 25 apples and drink it in a sip, but you could never eat 25 apples in a row, right? So juicing, it sort of bypasses all of our, again, natural anatomy and physiology that was put in place in the beautiful architecture of our bodies. It was put in place to regulate everything properly, including to regulate the appetite. So if you eat apples, probably after 4 or 5 apples, you will be full. You won't have any appetite anymore. And that's telling you something, that you have received all the amount of food and of nutrients from those apples that you're intended to receive. If you juice, you will increase also the amount of sugars, although fruit sugar is completely harmless. That's again another topic, the difference about the index, the glycemic index and the glycemic charge, which is a complete misunderstanding again in a lot of for a lot of people. But it will increase the amount of sugar. It will increase the amount of nutrients that you won't be able to metabolize, because you have not gone through the proper way of feeding, which is chewing, using saliva, which starts to assimilate nutrients, the fibers going through the digestive tract into the stomach, being digested, then into the intestines to be further assimilated. You have to go through that process, and juices bypass this whole process. So I would not advise juicing per se, but of course, if once in a while you want to have some orange juice or a mix of citrus juice, that's fine. In particular with citruses, it's easier to assimilate because they're naturally very water-rich fruits, and therefore there is much less fiber, and it's easier to assimilate. So you can do it for your pleasure once in a while, but you don't need to. You don't need to juice. Going back to nature, going back to the simplicity of nature, which provides all the fruits in abundance that we need, according to the area where we live, of course. Organic, because of course nature doesn't use pesticides. It's only a crazy man-made invention of the 20th century, which never existed for thousands of years. People didn't have to wonder whether they will eat organic or non-organic. Now it's becoming an everyday question. Oh, is this organic or is this not organic? But for thousands of years, we didn't need to ask this question. Everything on earth was organic, right? So it's a silly question, you know. It's what is not organic that is unnatural and that should be questioned and of course ideally eliminated. So so that's it, you know, very simple meals. Then there is a very important factor, that is fruit combination. You have to combine fruits properly, because if you don't combine them properly, you can create fermentation, and that will harm the microbiome. That will
Mhm.
harm the digestion and the assimilation of all the beautiful nutrients that you have in those fruits. So it's a waste. I mean, it's a shame really to have a poor combination, because you're wasting the food that's the beautiful food that you're putting in your body. So proper combination is acid fruits must be eaten with acid fruits, subacid with subacid, sweet fruits with sweet fruits, and melons on their own. Now, some people say that you can combine acid and subacid fruits. That is, for instance, acid orange and subacid um, apple. Some sorts of apple, not all the varieties of apple, because some are sweet, but the subacid varieties of apple. I would say ideally do not combine within one family, you know. If you eat acids, like you go on the citruses, you know, you can go on some, you know, watermelon if you want to. Ideally, if you want to like be at the ultimate level, provide the best possible digestion and assimilation for your body, you will go monofruit. So
Monofruit.
yeah, I have to say that's what I came to do very naturally and without even intending it. After a year, over a year, you will have a meal of one type of fruit. So I can have a whole meal of mangoes, and that will be a meal, you know. I will go on mangoes, and then I will have another meal with another fruit. But you know, I find it also, there is like, I do find there is a spiritual dimension, but you pay homage to a fruit. You pay
Mhm.
homage to the fruit that is given to you, that you have bought, you know, that you buy, but that is given to you by nature, that has grown on a tree, that has taken a while to grow and to mature, to be ripe. Because of course, another mandatory thing is the fruits have to be ripe. Unripe fruits are acid. They will be undigested, unassimilated, and they will harm the microbiome. So
And
of course we're
so
only talking about ripe fruits. And just finishing, the
yes.
homage that you pay to this fruit is honoring uh, that fruit by having it in a monomeal fashion. You know,
Okay.
you go all the way into having a journey with this fruit, of tasting within the same variety of the same fruit the differences. I can have, you know, a bunch of 5 or 6 huge Hayden mangoes from Mexico, which I love particularly. And those are the same variety of mangoes. They have grown on the same tree. And yet, each and every one of those mangoes will have a different taste. And that is so beautiful. Therefore,
Yeah.
you don't need to mix with other fruits, because within this one fruit, you have so much variety already. Of course, you have to have the journey to become sensitive enough to receive that and to feel it.
Yes. That's really beautiful. I love the spiritual dimension because there is always
Yeah,
a spiritual dimension to everything,
yeah.
especially eating as well. And so how would you recommend, like, so if you start your day, should you be starting with a sweet fruit, or should you be avoiding an acid food or a sub-acid food like the fruit, because there's so many different questions that have
Right.
arisen from this.
Okay. So I just wanna give a bottom line here, that when I speak of acid, I speak of acid fruits. They're acid by taste. They're actually alkaline by chemistry. So
Mhm.
there shouldn't be any misunderstanding here. When I said, for instance, an unripe fruit is acid, that is acid by chemistry. That means it's not alkaline. It's gonna lead to acidosis. Not to misunderstand with acid fruits, which are fruits that are acid by taste, but are
Mhm.
actually alkaline by their properties and by chemistry. So that's a very important bottom line. Now, how to start the day? It depends on everyone. It also depends at which stage you're at. When you start a journey on fruits, and that will lead us to a good conclusion. When you start a journey on fruits, you will start a journey of detox, because after years of cooked food, with more or less of dairy, more or less of grains, more or less of meat and animal products, which will affect the length and the strength of the detox period. But anyhow, you will get into that detox period when you shift to fruits. That detox period will have several effects. Some people, it will go great. It will have no effect whatsoever. They will feel great immediately. Most of people, they will go through the detox by having an increase of some of their symptoms, or even having some mild to acute new symptoms occurring, because that's the way of body eliminating all this old matter that has accumulated in our guts over the years. It has to be eliminated. It's still sitting there. All this old bacteria, all those parasites, all the mold from the wrong food. So the body will go through this detox, and this detox can last quite a while. Even after the acute symptoms have disappeared, there might be still, in some people, several weeks, some people several months, some people even some years, a couple of years, for this detox phase to be complete. Through detox, you live a very healthy life, and as I said, even after a couple of weeks, you start to feel all the great benefits of eating fruits, and you're gonna feel great. And this detox will go through its own track, its own path, its own journey. You just observe and sort of can play with it a little bit. How you play with it, that's basically answering to your question, how you structure your days with the choice of fruits. If you're going through detox, if you want to help the detox, you're gonna want to focus on more astringent fruits and more watery fruits. The greatest, most astringent fruit on earth is grape. And there has been, of course, a lot of studies about grape, and an amazing book, again, that was written nearly 100 years ago, which is called The Grape Cure. And it's the personal journey of a woman back in the early 20th century who healed herself from a very severe cancer, metastatic cancer, by basically switching her diet to grapes only for, I think, over 60 days. And she healed herself completely. And up to now, grapes is still one of the most powerful and healing fruit. So that would be the most astringent fruit. Lemon would be the next, and so on and so forth. So you go into the astringent fruits first, then on the water-rich fruits, and then more towards the sweet and dense fruits, and lastly, the fatty fruits, which basically is avocado. The most fatty fruit is avocado. Bottom line again, tomato and cucumber are fruits, right? So they can be part of a fruitarian diet. Now, if you have overcome the detox, or you don't need to use the fruits for detox per se, then the very standard way of putting an order into the fruits throughout the day is going from watery to dense.
Hi, I'm coming back live because we were running over time, but this topic is very interesting.
Okay, here I am again.
Great.
Yeah, we run a little over time, the 1 hour Instagram.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
All right, so we'll just wrap it up. So going back to what a daily routine should be on fruits, you go from the water-rich fruits to the dense fruits. So an easy example is the water-rich fruit is watermelon, and one of the most dense fruits is banana. So therefore, you will go throughout your day, starting by the more water-rich. So you will start with watermelon, and then that can be one meal for breakfast, shall we say. Or we haven't spoken about fasting and intermittent fasting. That's another topic. We can
Yes.
talk about intermittent fasting because I, for instance, don't eat in the morning. I eat in a window of 8 hours a day, and I
Okay.
fast for 16 hours every day. But that's just, the habit I went into very easily, happily, and has no constraints and lots of benefits. So, but basically, if you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, shall we say, as most of people, you can have watermelon for breakfast. You can have a lunch of citrus, so say oranges, or a lunch of apples, or a lunch of mangoes. And you can have a dinner of bananas, and you can even throw in some dates. You don't want to abuse too much of the dry fruits, but you can throw in a little bit of dry fruits with your most dense and most sweet fruits. You don't want to associate dry fruits with other kind of fruits because it will create fermentation. So for
Okay.
instance, like you don't want to mix oranges with dates. That's gonna be a no-go for digestion and assimilation.
Mhm.
So that's the daily routine, going, gradually from watery to dense. And you don't need that much dense fruits per se again. If you want to go all day on, you can go all day on monofruit, and it's perfectly fine. You can go all day on watermelon, and then go all next day on mangoes, and it's perfectly fine. As long as you have very tasty, ripe, and organic fruits that you enjoy, you know, go for what your taste buds and your body drives you toward, because that's
Mhm.
going to be always the best choice, um, versus your mental and intellectual choice. I should eat this, I should eat that. And I think the ultimate goal is to train ourselves to develop that instinct to go towards choosing the food we eat as being the right food for us at that particular moment. And once we have developed that instinct, we don't need any other thinking process. We don't need to think what I should eat now. You know what you need to eat now.
Mm. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This
All
was the
right. It
first.
was my pleasure. Thank you for
Thank you. We
having
have
me.
lots to learn from you. So hopefully, we can have more
We
talks with
can do
you.
it again. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.